Hey everybody, welcome to Carpool Chats. I'm John Eichberg with the Fuels Institute, and today I am thrilled to have a couple good friends of mine on the program, Chris Rapanick in the NACS Research Division and Joel Hirschboeck with Giant Eagle GetGo. We're going to be talking about something that's really important. We just came out of the pandemic that really disrupted the fuels market in 2020. And now at the end of May 2021, most of the country is starting to raise the restrictions, starting to get back to normal, trying to get the business up and running. We're going to talk about what we experienced last year and what we might expect in terms of transportation patterns and fuel demand and behavior of the consumers going forward 2021 and 2022. So, Chris, Joel, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, John. Pleasure to be here.
So Chris, let's start with you. NACS is putting together the State of the Industry report for operating year 2020, which I have to imagine was somewhat of a challenge for you guys, considering the past and trying to compare trends to past experiences. Can you kind of give us a rundown of what you saw in the data that happened last year when the whole country shut down?
Sure. So we are working on the SOR report now. We should be about ready to release on June the 1st, which is earlier than normal. The process was a little more difficult, obviously, because we know that comparing 2020 to years past is going to be a difficult thing to accomplish and do it well. So definitely interested to see what 2021 brings. But with that being said, basically the story for the industry, both fuel and inside, was a lot of the locations and the guys that were experiencing the first portion of the lockdowns ran into some situations where they needed gross profit dollars, and it was just one of those things this year that fuel happened to deliver where the inside business didn't. So NACS is a proponent of developing the inside business and relying less on margins for fuel to kind of keep your business afloat. And in 2020, if it weren't for fuel margins, then there probably would have been a lot more businesses that did not float. So, a lot of kind of side stories there with the amount of closings that we experience and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think that the industry just kind of, let a satisfied sigh out that we were able to maximize margins this year to kind of support some of that inside business that we lost.
And now, Joel, from the retail perspective, I remember seeing some reports that I knew miles traveled were down about 45 to 50% back in March. Gasoline demand also followed suit. What did you guys experience in terms of your operating markets? Was it that significant of a drop in demand, or was there a kind of continuation of resiliency in the market where you guys are operating?
What I would say for us specifically, because we do particularly operate within metro markets, we certainly were hit by the commuter demand on top of the overall kind of lockdown measures that went into place. So we saw, we typically do more volume than the average C-store. So when the changes took place, we saw a larger decline. But now we're starting to see a better return on some of that. Now, the commuter traffic is still absent to some degree, right? So we've been seeing that seasonal traffic as we're starting to approach summer. And as you've said, John, some of the restrictions have been lifted. We saw that seasonal traffic starting to come back earlier, probably about a month earlier than what we normally would have seen it. The real question will be, as we get through the summer and towards fall, will schools be in session and will be people going back to work or not?
Yeah, I think, I saw some of the miles traveled stats towards the end of 2020, and they were only about 5 to 10% below 2019. But the day parts are completely messed up. The convenience industry usually has pretty predictable volume and traffic based upon commuting patterns. Throw those out the window, and hopefully, as people start going back to work, those will kind of recover. Are you starting to see any return to normal at all, or is the transition period right now between fully open and what we've gone through is summertime, so kids are out of school, it makes it really challenging. But are there any indications that travel patterns may return to normal?
I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to tighten up. This week is becoming a good week again for us for volume. Obviously, it's been a little goofy recently with the Colonial Pipeline issue and kind of the reaction post that. But I think this pre-holiday week has has been proving out to be a good week for us. I think AAA, referenced that there's going to be an increase in travel a fair amount this weekend. So we're looking forward to seeing that in the numbers. The commuter traffic, though, to your point, day part, I mean, the mornings are still a little sparse. We're seeing more activity midday. Obviously, product mixes had to be changed to kind of account for some of that and keep the inside sales strong. But we're targeting to be better than this past year for our next fiscal year, and probably still a little bit below 2019 numbers based on where we operate. I think if you operate in our rural communities more predominantly, I think you've got a much more 2019-like volumes.
Yeah, Chris, how does that pair up with what you guys have been seeing through CSX and through the data analysis you guys have been doing?
Oh, definitely same thing. Now I know that Joel, those guys operate up in the Northeast region, or at least the next Northeast region anyway, and completely agree. Where he mentioned rural, we're seeing obviously our South Central region for NACS, that Texas Oklahoma area, and the Southeast are coming back a little faster than say the Northeast or the West. But John, we're seeing I just for kicks, I'm comparing April of this year versus March of this year, and we're seeing double-digit increases in all the categories:
Wow.
fuel, transaction counts, everything. So it's very clear to see, that as more folks are opening up and the states are releasing these mandates, that people are in the stores, they're shopping, buying fuel as well. So it's pretty exciting to see, the whole data thing. If you're kind of a data geek and you can watch the progression of how things changed through 20, when second quarter when things started getting really bad, and where we're at now, it's the perfect the data lays out perfectly against kind of the story. It doesn't happen very frequently, especially on like a nationwide level. It's if you're a data guy, it's kind of exciting.
We were discussing about April being double digits higher than March. When we were in the heart of the pandemic, we used to speculate, okay, are we going to come flying out like cockroaches when we're released from our prisons? Or are we going to come out like a hermit squinting at the sun going, I don't know. And I think there's still some people who are very nervous coming out, but man, I'm in Virginia and they are releasing the mask mandate and they're letting people, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear masks. And I went to the grocery store last week and half the employees weren't wearing masks. And I thought, this is weird. I haven't seen mouths and noses like this in months. It was kind of interesting. And it'll be interesting to see how people accommodate, how they transition into that.
It's crazy.
But the pandemic was a huge issue. Of course, it's going to be the asterisk on 2020 forever. But there's so many other things that go into the fuel market. For 20 years plus, I've been monitoring the crude oil markets because crude oil uses 60 to 70% of the retail price of gasoline. Last year, crude oil was all over the place. This year, we had a pipeline problem attack, and so we're running into all these other variables that go into it. What are you guys looking for when you think? And then we got the Biden administration that's coming in and changing the approach to transportation energy, renewing the focus on carbon mitigation. When you think about the future, we can start with you, Chris. What are the triggers? What are the market signals you're looking for to kind of give you an idea of the health of the industry as a whole, with all those variables swirling around us and creating noise, kind of like the cicadas that are they're hitting this year?
I think that what it really comes down to, and kind of NACS's position on all this, especially since I've been here for the last 10 years, is that fuels business is so fragile, and it's kind of hard to believe, even after being around it for so many years, that the circumstances that led to 2020, with Saudi Arabia and Russia and all of those things that took place. How amazing it is that the industry always just kind of seems to find that thing, whether it be, a huge bump in food service sales, or in this particular case, super cheap gas and really high margins. It's amazing to me how something always just kind of seems to, save our bacon, if you will. So with that being said, continuing to understand that, okay, so we have a cyber attack on Colonial and things like that. What can you do to prepare for those things? The answer is kind of nothing, unfortunately. So for us, at NACS Research, we're still kind of beating that drum to say, hey, develop your inside business, develop, the things that the consumer, especially post-pandemic are going to be interested in, and use the fuel business to support that, not the other way around. So increased transaction counts both at the pump and inside are obviously good for us. Big baskets on the inside as well. So we want people spending more on the inside than they did before. And all those things are kind of coming to fruition. It's just, and again, it's just kind of amazing to me how fragile that business actually is after all these years.
I remember when Superstorm Sandy came through and retailers ran out of fuel and we knew the storm was coming. People were saying, I don't understand why they didn't prepare for this. Why didn't you store more fuel? And, our response was, you have a 10,000 gallon tank. You can't put 11,000 gallons in it. EPA really doesn't like that. And so Joel, with the administration coming and saying we want to install 500,000 charging stations by 2030, we want to promote electric vehicles, we want to reduce the carbon intensity, canceling Keystone XL pipeline. All these signals are kind of indicating that the current administration, Congress, are really focused on we need to move away from fossil fuels. Clearly, petroleum, gasoline, diesel, fossil fuel business. From your guys' perspective, how are you looking at the future of transportation energy and what you guys need to do to position GetGo to be successful as the market starts to evolve to a more carbon sensitive type of structure?
Yeah, I think the first thing to remember is that liquid fuels is still going to be here for quite some time. It's going to take a long time to swap out all the vehicles throughout the U.S. The fleet, and so we're going to have that robust business case there for a period of time. But it doesn't mean you can't ignore the future, right? So it's getting engaged with EV systems, partnering with the different companies that are out there, understanding what the administration is proposing and how you participate. I think it's protecting the capitalistic nature of retail's involvement in those spaces and making sure that we have an opportunity to service the customers and provide them what they want, and that it's not over subsidized by utilities and different things to where we can't make it a good marketplace to participate. So I think you have to monitor all of those things, right? And then I think you still have to pay attention to bioblends and different things like that. And we're talking about carbon capture. So if you have to be involved in all of the spaces and understand where they are and kind of move at pace with them, so that you can react if something changes. But I think it's going to change slowly. It's more about staying engaged and being knowledgeable.
And I think that's kind of something we've been talking about the Fields Institute forever. Is it takes a long time to turn the Titanic, and the United States transportation sector is much bigger than the Titanic. So the off ramp for a combustion engine and the on ramp for anything else is pretty long. So we got decades to make adjustments, but the times are changing, and the pace of change is accelerating. But I want to go back and ask Chris about this, because you raised, Joel, the role of biofuels, and one of the things we've been talking about is, if you think that electric vehicles are the white knights going to save the world from climate issues, we've already lost, because it's going to take so long for that technology to have a major impact on the market. What are we going to do to lower the carbon intensity in the interim? I've always looked at biofuels. So, Chris, from the data you guys look at, have you seen any trends in terms of the industry's sales of biofuel blends, whether it be biodiesel or ethanol blends or anything like that in the data?
It's still a very small piece. So we don't get a lot into specifics as far as retailers go or whatever, but you see some patches and some folks that are moving into other fuels, bio included. But John, we're talking about a piece of a percentage of the regular volume. So I don't know if Joel and those guys are playing in that part or not, but it's so small now that again, this on ramp has got to be years and years and years long. Definitely not something that we talk about a lot.
So, Joel, what are you guys seeing in the biofuels market?
For us particularly, it's more about what's the future opportunity.
Right.
In my past life, I was pretty involved with it, just because of our infrastructure and what made sense and where we operated. It's a different path, and I think you see that throughout the country, where it makes the most sense and how you can operate the different types of products and get them in front of the consumer. So it's a moving target still, along with everything, and I think that's why it keeps it at a smaller percentage. So it's just working through the different supply points and the relationships and finding that right path forward.
Yeah, I
It's
keep watching
definitely.
the
Oh,
news.
I'm sorry. Go
Go,
ahead, John.
Chris.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
it's definitely kind of like the life that we live in NACS research is that we don't always hear about the plan. We just kind of see the bump. So next year we may be talking about something that was 2%, maybe 6% or whatever. So it's unfortunate that kind of it's always historical, but it's still obviously interesting to follow.
Well, I think my projection is you're going to find in the data in the next couple of years an increased reliance in biodiesel and renewable diesel, especially with the credits and low carbon fuel
Yep.
standard out in California. Just saw a news article today. Neste, who produces a lot of renewable diesel, is also going to be testing a renewable gasoline over in Europe, which could have a 65% reduction in carbon intensity, which is significant.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel, you mentioned EVs are a long way off. I believe they're here, but the market potential is a long way off. And in that interim, there's going to be new stuff popping up. And that's why I think it's so important that we pay attention to use case scenarios and what solutions can deliver reduced carbon emissions from different applications. And maybe it's not a one size fits all strategy. Maybe it's a multiple opportunity there. I know in your past life, you guys explored a whole bunch of different types of fuel products. Do you see a future where we have multiple liquid fuels, EV chargers, maybe gaseous fuels, maybe hydrogen at the same location, or is that something that the industry can even accommodate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you have to have one kind of winner, because you have to build the efficiencies within the industry, and it will happen naturally if it makes sense, right? I mean, you look at the current liquid fuels industry; it is probably the most efficient industry in the world. I mean, to have a pipeline go down, to Hurricane Sandy, to this pandemic, I mean, it reacted almost instantly if you think about it. Yeah, were there bumps in the road along the way as things shifted and changed? Yes, there were. And you see that in the pricing and what happened. But the industry reacted, right? And supply and demand was able to do that. So you can try to put all of these things in one place, but I don't know how you economically manage that and get them, because you start losing scale when you spread it out too thin. So you still have to have something with scale to really drive it. And then, it may ebb and flow and shift, and you got to be in front of that. And hopefully you have flexibility in your network that you can accommodate it.
Yeah, I mean, and even got to look at the footprint. How much space do you have to dedicate to multiple
Right.
opportunities, especially when the newer ones are such slow throughput. When you guys are looking at building or redoing these sites, are you thinking about, even if you're not ready to go into electric vehicle charging, are you thinking about future proofing to upgrade your power panel, make sure you got the supply, so if the moment is right, you can get into the business pretty quickly?
We're having those discussions about that. We're still a little bit early stages. We're partnering with Tesla, Green Lots, and
Mm-hmm.
talking to others about, bringing some electrification to our sites. So we're definitely planning the right sites. The other piece of it is where does it make sense, right? Are you on an interstate? Are you in city center? Or are you rural? Certain applications are going to work in different scenarios and different locations for the store. So I think, yes, are those discussions happening? Are we thinking about it? And what's the right thing to do at each location? You definitely think you want to map that out and be thinking about that, and doing what you can, right? You can put a lot of underground conduit and some other things to kind of make runs easier if you want to install it later for pretty cheap. So if that makes sense, go that route.
Chris, one of the questions I get a lot is, so do we have the opportunity with new builds to really make a splash in expanding the infrastructure for these alternative fuels? And what is the pace of construction? One of the things that I'm concerned about going forward at the industry as a whole is we have just gone through EMV. We're still going through it, very expensive upgrade to our terminals. We are going through this electric vehicle enthusiasm, momentum. We've got CAFE standards, which is going to get ratcheted up again. It's going to reduce gasoline demand. So you're looking at maybe a 20% drop in gasoline demand in the next 20 years. You've got an aging infrastructure of underground storage tanks out there at or near their 30-year life expectancy, triggering a six-figure investment to upgrade. Are we seeing an anticipated growth or contraction in the industry, and how does that compare with the build of new stores? Do we see anything like that in the data?
Oh yeah, so we do what we call the demographic survey every year, John. And what we do is we ask, guys that participate in the SOI how frequently they're remodeling, how many stores they raised and rebuilt. So typically all those things happen about every 7 years for the average chain. And just this year, actually, we've included some other things like, do you have chargers on property? So we're going to be able to track that a little bit better.
Good.
But a lot of guys are saying that they are building that infrastructure in. Some of the guys that are, when they buy a new chain, a lot of times they want to raise all the buildings and start again. So they're doing that work now. It's definitely, on the horizon a lot more than it's ever been. I think the main thing for, this 500,000 charger piece is, this industry is kind of known for only keeping people on property for 3.5 minutes on average, whether you go inside or whether you're pumping gas. And there's so many other locations, retail like grocery or QSRs that are more kind of fitting to get that 15 or 20-minute trip versus convenience, and that's what we have to be careful about. As the Wendy's or a Sonic, for example, where you're already pulled into their little special lane already. They're just tailor made for charging, I believe, and I think that's what we need to be concerned about, and where we go back to maybe our legislators and say, hey, we want our fair share of that 500,000 charger piece. Very important, I think.
Your reference to Sonic makes you think maybe we're going to have a resurgence in a car hop business,
Right,
where they're going to
right.
come out on the roller skates, plug in your car, grab your order, feed you, then unplug your car, and off you go. That's going to be an interesting dynamic. See if that develops
Absolutely.
that way.
Yeah, I
So
think.
last question, Joel.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the shift of convenience retailing to bringing food forward too is also making space for that, right? So we
Yeah.
have our MTO cafe and markets. We have indoor seating. We've got, I think, 40 or 50 parking slots at a lot of our new
Right.
build stores that are
Wow.
designed to be able to service those different customers. So, when you own the best corner, convenience retailing and fueling doesn't always have to be the primary focus. So what
That's
else
right.
is there, and what else do you bring to market? So I think there's going to be some flexibility, and there's going to be some leaning and shifting as we move forward and kind of think about the comprehensive business plan long term.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think your comments are spot on. That's what the companies trying to install chargers are looking for. They're looking for space with enough parking to dedicate to some chargers. They're looking for a place where people can get food, looking for a place where people can hang out for 20 or 30 minutes. We don't need to think about hour-long dwell times for the on-the-go traveler. And what I've been looking at in terms of working with NACS on their EV strategy is the convenience stores own the corners. They own that market. They are where customers have been going for 100 years to refuel their vehicles. When they get into an EV, they're going to be charging at home, they're going to be charging at the park, charging at the grocery store, they're going to be charging everywhere. But when they need electricity, the first place they're going to think about is the gas station. And it's going to be absolutely critical that you strike when that iron's hot, because you fail them early on, they're not coming back. And so we need to make sure we have visibility that we are offering them the services they need. Even if we're not making money now, get it entrenched in their head that when you need us, when you need electricity, we're there for you. And you don't have to go searching around for it. I think that's an opportunity we got to make sure that we capitalize on.
Very true.
So last question, as we go into the summer months, we talked about the end of the pandemic. Summer is usually a great season for the industry. A lot of enthusiasm. People are out, sun's out longer. They're having fun. They're going to the pool, going to the beach. Any idea, any projections on what you think the summer is going to look like in terms of business opportunities? Is it going to be a blockbuster? This is going to be a fantastic summer, or do you expect there's still going to be some trepidation going into the next 3 months?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good summer. I mean, we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing some of the seasonal lift starting probably a month earlier this year. I think we had some good weather to help with that. But I think people, with the mask mandates being lifted, CDC's new guidance coming out, I think people are just excited to kind of be back to normal. So I think you're going to see a lot of traveling and exploring just around, because you haven't been doing it for a year. So we're expecting a lot of big things. We got a lot of great promos from an inside perspective, really trying to lean into that and get people back into the store. So I see inside sales being strong this summer as people are out and about and just kind of want to get back to that normalcy. And that quick stop in the convenience store feels normal, right? It's what we used to always do. So I think you're going to have that. I think with the product mix changes and bringing some new stuff to life, we've got Spike Slushies, which is an outstanding product, especially at a baseball game or something like
Did
that.
you say spiked slushies?
Spike Slushies, yeah, they're
Oh
awesome,
man, that's so dangerous.
Yeah, they are outstanding.
And you're killing it with them too, by the way, right? It's just not even funny.
It's great. So so there's a lot of good opportunities out there, I think, and I think we'll see it. We'll still be hindered by the commuter traffic, especially in the metro markets, from a volume perspective. But I think the seasonal traffic will be higher than maybe it normally would have been.
Hey, Chris, any final thoughts on summer?
Oh yeah. So I think that what we're looking at now is we really should be concerned with the June July portion of it versus where we're at now, because that's where it's probably going to get difficult when we start to see a little bit more traffic. But as far as comparison goes, we need to look at 2019 versus 21. And I think that if we finish 21, at the same levels that we had it in 19, that it would be a huge win for us. But, road trips, who's ever heard of having to make a reservation to get into Yellowstone National Park? I mean, this stuff is ridiculous, right? So you have to think that road trips are going to be out there. You have to think that people are going to be spending time outdoors. Because number one, either they hadn't been, or number two, it's considered safe. So yeah, I have to think, John, that this is going to be a crazy summer, and it's already looking that way. Some of the categories that did really well last year, like beer, for example, all alcohol, really. Some of those guys are probably kind of sweating it a little bit because they had such a great year last year. But I think that if we're able to, especially at a gross profit level, if we're able to get some of this, new business on the inside and from food service that we didn't have last year, if we're able just to come in flat at what we had for 2019, I think it would be pretty impressive.
Well, hopefully, we enter summer 2021, mask free, worry free.
Absolutely.
The old song, "Summertime, Where Living Is Easy." I think that's kind of the heart and soul of this industry. This industry is actually a fun industry. People like to swing by convenience stores when they go in places fun. And the summertime is the best time to do that. So, Chris, Joel, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as well.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
And everybody, thanks for turning in Carpool Chats, and we'll talk to you next time.